Good morning and welcome back to News and Views right here on Salam Media. You're still tuned into your home of humanitarian journalism with myself, Salalo Makwidiri. The time is 8:30, and our focus now will be on the Syrian civil war, which is now entering its 14th year. A new wave of violence has erupted with opposition forces making significant advances in northern Syria, capturing parts of Aleppo and pressing toward Hama. With these developments, the question arises: are we witnessing a pivotal moment in this protracted conflict? And to help us unpack the situation, we're joined by Bilal Abdul Kareem. He's an American journalist based in Syria who has been on the ground documenting these events and providing unparalleled insight into the complexities of the region. Bilal, assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. How are you? Pleasure's all ours. I think first and foremost, we can start with a bit of context here. Can you describe the current situation near Hama and Aleppo? What's the mood like among the people, and just how intense has the fighting been on the ground in the last 48 hours?
We just have to try to get to a quick recap. Rebel forces had set out to take over the city of Aleppo. That was accomplished in lightning speed. But the forces of Bashar al-Assad were continuing to crumble, and the entire province of Aleppo, including its countryside, all fell. Now, you spoke about the last 48 hours. The last 48 hours, the story is not Aleppo. The story is Hama, which is half the distance to Damascus from the northern part of the country to the southern part of the country. Right now, the city of Hama is almost encircled by rebel forces. That means that should Hama fall, then that entire territory from the north to the middle part of the country, much of it falls into rebel hands, and that means that the third largest city, which is Homs, and of course the number one city, which is Damascus, all come within the realm of possibility.
And one thing that is quite interesting, and I want to hear your opinion on, is if the opposition forces succeed in, taking Hama, what strategic implications could this have for the Assad regime, especially in terms of the coastal cities and some of the Russian interests that are involved?
In my opinion, Assad forces are imploding and crumbling. I don't want to take anything away from rebel forces. They're doing a very difficult job, and they are cutting through the defenses of the Syrian Arab Army. But I also have to be honest with you in saying that there is part of this story which is an implosion. The spirit to fight, the willingness to continue to fight, the resources to fight are not there. The Russians, before this offensive actually began, pulled out of certain key areas of the conflict. Just after it began, they pulled out of certain their bases out of the area. That really lowered the morale of the Syrian Arab Army because they felt abandoned. I'm not talking about their commanders. I'm talking about their soldiers. They're feeling like, well, look, the Russians have been pulled out. We don't have the resources to fight these guys. Even the skies, which were buzzing with Russian warplanes back in 2016, when they carpet bombed Aleppo City to take it back, the skies are only hosting a Russian plane here or there, which is bombing hospitals in Idlib and other civilian institutions. So, the resources that the Russians had, they don't have right now because they're knee-deep in the Ukrainian war. If we're talking about Iran, they've had numerous skirmishes and issues with the Israelis, they're not able to commit more resources. And if they could, which we've heard in recent days, that they would commit large numbers of troops to Syria, that's going to attract a carpet bomb campaign from the Israelis. So they're out of the picture to some extent. And then you have Hezbollah, who's fighting a war in southern Lebanon. Even the ceasefire is not holding. So they don't have the troops, the manpower, the resources to be able to commit to propping up the decrepit regime of Bashar al-Assad.
I want us to shift our focus now to the humanitarian impact. I think we've seen the images of tens of thousands that have been displaced due to the recent violence. What are the conditions right now for those that are fleeing the fighting, and what kind of challenges do they face?
Well, there are something to the tune of 50,000 refugees, new refugees, which have been created from areas. However, after having said that, in the past, seeing convoys of refugees was something that was very saddening to see. However, at this time, those convoys of refugees, most of them, not all of them, most of them are going back home. And that's something they haven't been able to do since 2012. So there are refugees that are fleeing the conflict zones, but that doesn't tell the predominant part of the story. The predominant part of the story is that many of the refugees, which have been refugees since 2012, 2013, 2014, are going home for the first time since that time and reuniting with their families. That's huge.
And just for future outlook's sake, what would you say are the opposition's broader goals beyond just capturing Hama? Could Damascus probably be a realistic target for them next?
Probably not. The realistic target for them after Hama would be Homs, which is the closest major city to Hama. It's approximately 25 kilometers from the city of Hama to the borders of the province of Homs. So that's the most likely target afterwards. However, something else is going on in Dara, in Suede, and in a few other places. There are local militia forces which are actually attacking regime troops and trying to drive them out of their areas. So the issues with the Syrian Arab Army are not only with quote unquote the proper rebel force, but it's with the Syrian people. So I don't imagine that the regime of Bashar al-Assad is going to be in place a month from now.
One thing that maybe I would like you to unpack a bit is just as a journalist who's been on the ground in Syria for such a long time. I think in the beginning I mentioned the fact that the civil war is now entering its 14th year. What would you say or what do you think the world is failing to understand about the ongoing conflict in Syria that is not maybe on mainstream media, or it's not that well publicized?
Yeah, to be honest with you, I think what the world needs to understand is as follows, and I think that a lot of people do get this: the Palestinians, the Syrians, and many other people have been under oppression for a long time, and anybody that has the ability to fight back, to resist that oppression, should be applauded and cheered by the citizens of the world. I didn't say government, I said the citizens of the world. Because the government, they have all these different special interests. But I'm talking about the average person who would just sit there, and when you're listening to a spokesman for the Pentagon or from Moscow or something like that, who are talking about terrorists and so on and so forth, just ask yourself a question. Who is the person who's calling these people terrorists? These are people backing Israelis to kill and to take over the land of the Palestinians and starve them and commit a genocide. Should we listen to their characterizations in terms of who's a terrorist and who isn't? I think that when people really look at it, they're not stupid, they're smart, and they can be able to figure out who's the real terrorist and who isn't, regardless as to how expensive it is.
No, I think you're making a really, really valid point there. But just in closing, I know you don't have a crystal ball, but what do you foresee happening in the next few days when this war continues to unfold, and you have international involvement? We've heard reports of the likes of Turkey also being involved to some extent. The UN has also came out and has warned of a worsening crisis if there's no de-escalation. So just looking forward in your crystal ball, what can we expect in the next few coming days?
Okay, what kind of response would you like to have? The Bilal Abdul Kareem response, who's the journalist, or the Bilal Abdul Kareem response, who's the person? Which one would you like to have?
Sorry, I didn't get that.
I'm saying there are two types of responses that I can give you. If I can give you the Bilal Abdul Kareem response, who's the person, this is what I would say. And it is as follows. I don't want to hear from any UN. I don't want to hear from any of these bodies talking about de-escalation, because when the Syrian people were getting their butts kicked and the regime had their boot on their neck and the Russians were giving them a political cover at the United Nations Security Council, and nobody around the world cared. It didn't make a difference to anybody. Nobody was even thinking about the Syrian civil war. The people were literally burning and were literally melting away in the sand. Now, when they fight back and they're saying we're going to take back territory and so on and so forth, now people want to talk about, okay, well, we need to talk de-escalation. The time for de-escalation is over. That's finished. That's dead. It's time to, because you can either do one of two things, and the South Africans understand this very well. You either fight back so that with strength, so that you can secure your rights, or you get eaten up. And that's exactly where we are today. That's not the journalistic response. That's Bilal, the person response.
I think we're going to leave it there, Bilal. Jazakallah so much for giving us your time and just giving us, first-hand accounts from someone who's currently in Syria, who's seeing and is watching this conflict as it unfolds. So I think very, very important insights, and I'm pretty sure that we'll be catching up with you in the not so distant future to get the latest.
Excellent, and I'll be waiting for you. Thank you.
There we go. There is Bilal Abdul Kareem. Is a Syria-based American journalist who's been giving us the latest of on the Syrian war that is currently ongoing, a Syrian civil war, which is also coincidentally it's entering its 14th year, and yeah, we're seeing some worrying developments there as the war continues to unfold. Just if I can give you a quick synopsis there of the current situation in Syria as of yesterday. There's been renewed violence. Syrian and Russian warplanes have intensified air and missile strikes in Aleppo, Idlib, and Hama. This following a major opposition offensive launched on November 27, 2024. The opposition, led by Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS, captured significant parts of Aleppo, making this the most notable advance since 2016. Well, the humanitarian impact, there's been civilian casualties and that are predicted to be around 157. This is including 39 children and 15 women who were confirmed to be killed between November 27th and December the 2nd. This is according to the Syrian Network for Human Rights. This violence marks the most significant breach of the 2020 Idlib ceasefire brokered by Russia and Turkey. When it comes to territorial control, well, four key groups control various regions in Syria. You have the Syrian government forces. They are supported by the National Defense Forces with strongholds in regime-held areas. You also have the Syrian Democratic Forces, the SDF, which is a Kurdish-led, backed by the United States, who dominate in eastern Syria. And then you have the HTS and allied groups. They are the largest presence in opposition-held Idlib. And then you have the Turkish backed Syrian rebel forces who are operating in the northern Syria, under the Syrian National Army. Opposition forces are composed of various alliances with the previously mentioned HTS and the National Front of Liberation as the largest coalitions. These groups operate under the Unified Military Operations Command, marking a coordinated effort to challenge government forces. And when it comes to strategic and political ramifications, well, opposition advances opposing a direct threat to President Bashar al-Assad's regime, especially if they move towards strategic cities like Hama or Damascus, and analysts are warning of potential difficulties of opposition groups to sustain their gains due to limited resources and governance challenges. So yeah, that's the latest coming out of Syria right now. We'll continue keeping a close eye on the story and giving you the latest, but we're going to leave it here for now.